Another year, another set of power rankings that will wind up being incredibly wrong by the end of the year. I know I said I wouldn't get this out until I finished my team preview series, but I screwed up the timing of that and I'm pretty much unable to finish that on time now, so I'm discontinuing that. I'm sorry. I'm putting extra effort into this video to make up for that though, so hopefully it's alright. I will be taking into account scrimbucks and recent news, so keep that in mind. Let's just hop into it with my number 20 pick, the London Spitfire. Sorry London fans, it's not getting much better for you. They have some promising pieces. Sparker and Shax are still great. Shax especially has a ton of potential. Admiral is one of my most hyped up rookies out of EU contenders and Poco. But I just don't see them being very competitive considering objectively their talent is middling at best. Shax Sparker at their peak is pretty middling, honestly. Hottie and Poco I don't have much high hopes for either. Hottie did not impress me that much last year, and Poco hasn't seen significant playtime since Season 2. I know it's not his fault, but I think he's a bit of a wild card. The final reason they're cemented here is the flex support switch-up. The last-minute switch-up has allegedly led to them struggling, especially in scrims, and being pretty much straight-up bad. These guys have some promising pieces, and I hope they do well. London fans have been suffering since Season 2, but I just don't see them being very successful with this roster. Number 19 is the Los Angeles Valiant. I know I said I was somewhat high on these guys, but what with the no-hill Dion innovation pickups? But I think no-hill is getting a bit lost in the sauce. I don't really know what they're doing at this point. No-hill has to have some grand strategy because this roster build is just not it. 5 DPS, 3 hit scans, 1 flex DPS, and a Sombra 1-trick. A Zarya 1-trick who hasn't played in 18 months. A flex support who hasn't left the bench for 2 years. Frankly, the only team this roster is better than on paper is London. And I definitely trust No-hill. He's one of my favorite coaches. But I just don't see this team succeeding, especially when the rest of APAC is looking so good. My personal theory is that they're preparing hard for the Doom counter meta of Zarya, Sombra, Hitscan, Ana, and Lucio, but even then this team won't stand up to the other metas we could see in my opinion. Despite this, I still think they outperformed London on paper, and it definitely doesn't help that Yiska implied they're eating shit in scrims as well. I understand believing in no-hill, but it's just really weird and I can't really trust it. It makes zero sense to me. Next up, at number 18, we have the Vancouver Titans. I want to put these guys higher. They have a lot of great pieces. Shockwave has always had top-tier potential, popping off hard even on struggling teams. Aspire had a breakout rookie year despite bad circumstances. Psycho, I think, is a great piece for the team, though he'll likely just be backup. False, I have high hopes for. Meza is a fantastic all-around main support player. On paper, they should be fantastic, but unfortunately on paper doesn't always cut it. Retaining Flubby and Pew is questionable. I don't think they are terrible coaches, but neither has had any amount of successes in the league. This is also a scrimbooks thing as well. Apparently they have not been performing much better than London in scrims as of late, and are solidly grouped together as the worst teams in NA. It's sad, but their on-paper starting 5 was already nothing that special or top tier in NA, so their subpar coaching and bad scrim results pushes them to the bottom for me. Sorry EU fans, and I'm extra sorry to EU fans to introduce our number 17, the Paris Eternal. Yeah, I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong. Paris are a solid team. They have a great backline. Glister is an upgrade to Onigod, and Naga is a great flex DPS. But I'm not that impressed with them. They barely upgraded their team that only got 4 quality wins, arguably 3, because one of which was against Washington during the bench decay arc. Those 3 wins were, by the way, only really made possible due to the strong mental of the team to pull through on close map 5s, which has been pointed out to be due to the coaching of Getamazed, who is now gone. I also find their tank line a bit middling. I've never been a big fan of Dawn. He's okay, I think. He's a good ball, but I don't think he's great outside of that. Though apparently he has been good at the new Doom, though, so maybe it's okay. And Basol is great, but he's unproven off of the Diva, who doesn't seem that great right now. Zarya seems to be the best off-tank, and he's a bit unproven on her. I also have some questions about Naga. While I think he's really good, I don't know if he can stand with the other flex DPS in the region. He's better than the ones below him, but like, there's Proper, Sparkle, Kevster, Narrow and Speedily, Pelican, Yaki. Even although an Assassin I would say are better. Paris definitely do have punch-up potential. The amount of synergy they have with each other should not be glossed over, but I just don't think they did enough to upgrade when every other team in their tier previously made big moves and picked up top-tier rookies, like Toronto and Boston. But again, they do have that teamwork, and that synergy is unmatched thus far by other teams, and are performing well in scrims on both comps. Paris fans do have something to look forward to. Number 16 is going to be the Gonzo Charge. While I do like what Gonzo have a lot, it's hard for me to see them competing up to the level of others due to various reasons. Firstly, while I am a fan of Develop, Eileen, and Choi, and think that on paper they should be an insane trio, The seeming loss to Choisewan is a blow, and their loss to the Tracer player could definitely hurt them if she becomes strong in future metas. Rio I'm also not that high on. He's kind of mid off of the Orisa, who is completely different. But if they can keep crawling it there 100% of the time, they can be cracked out. He is amazing. Unique and Molly is actually a really solid backline. Unique has a great Lucio, who seems strong right now, and a good Brig, and Molly is pretty cracked. Honestly, this is a pretty well-rounded lineup. I just worry. It seems like Ryan and Doom are the best tanks right now, and I don't really trust Rio on either of them. Though it seems that Doom is surprisingly being played by off-tanks, so maybe Krong can make some waves. I feel like DPS and tank line are inflexible, and while Molly has top-tier potential in APAC, Unique falls behind when compared to, say, Li Jae-gon, Langsa, Superik, Nisha, but still a solid lineup that can absolutely be stealing some wins from teams otherwise above them in APAC, maybe even upsetting Shanghai and Seoul in the right circumstances. But for now, they are at the bottom. Number 15 is, sorry NYXL fans, the New York Excelsior. I know. They should be way higher based on on-paper quality. Yaki and Flora is arguably a top 3 DPS line in the region. Kellon I expect to be an incredibly rookie tank, and is probably who I think will be the best unless he gets screwed by the team doing poorly like Mag. Gangnam Jin I have a lot of hope for, but I just don't like what's going on with him past the surface. A lot of this is based on Yiska scrimbucks and leaks, but based on what I'm hearing, they're having strategic issues between players which is causing poor performance in scrims. They got together late and recently had issues with Kellon leaving to go to Korea, further halting their scrims. But the main thing is, their roster is insanely small. I know I'll have some teams with small rosters ahead of this, but even then, this team is so small it's a bit absurd. They are incredibly meta dependent. If they get the 1 or 2 metas they want, they'll pop off, maybe even be top 5, could be top 3 in the region. But outside of that, they'll struggle. And having two flex supports that have never really flexed onto the main support, and not even really the Brig, it's scary, man. They are so limited with so many holes. It's tragic because Kellon, Yaki, and Flora are so good. And I feel like Yaki is just about to quit if he has to hard carry a flailing team for a second year in a row. But we could be headed that way. I want to like this roster. I feel like they could be solid. But it's hard to rate a team with a fucking DPS line of Flora and Yaki this low, but I can't in good faith rate them much higher. Number 14 is going to be the Florida Mayhem. Sorry guys, I'm not that optimistic. I think Florida has a lot of good scrimbucks going for them heading into next year. Someone is apparently very good at the Ryan and all heroes, which is very good for them heading into next year where Ryan is strong. And Checkmate is apparently very solid at the flex DPS position. XC and Hightown are a strong double hitscan duo, though XC isn't actually joining the team until a stage or two into the season, which would hurt them. But frankly, I don't have that much faith. I think the DPS line is middling at best. I don't rate Adam that highly, and their support line is exceedingly mediocre. Kareev and Animo haven't been good since 2019, and Sir Majed isn't top tier, I think. This definitely has some egg on face potential, and I respect Goonva a lot as a coach, but I just think in terms of on-paper talent, I can't place them much higher, just based on on-paper talent. Number 13 is going to be the Philadelphia Fusion. Before I get mad at me, Fusion fans, hear me out. I think their DPS are cracked. Carpe and MN3 I regard as top hit scans in the league, and Zest is underrated, if a bit underwhelming compared to other flex DPS in APAC, but I just am not huge on the rest of the team, man. Bellistry I don't think is that good when you compare him to the rest of the league, and AimGod and Fixa might be the worst backline in APAC. AimGod has never been that good of a player, and Fixa is generally very low impact. I'm not that high on either of them. Then Fury I really do. I think he's a really flexible and great player, but honestly, he did not have the best year on Washington, and it would not surprise me if he wound up being surpassed by others in the region, such as Krong and Ligue. Their DPS definitely have top tier potential. MN3 could be contending for Rookie of the Year, but I feel like they fall apart when directly compared to other teams, even in their region. They absolutely have punch of potential though. I could very well see them in the postseason tournament. Number 12 is going to be the Boston Uprising. I'm pretty big on this team. Despite how goofy their roster looks on paper, they are incredibly well-rounded. Unless there's some funny meta of a double projectile, they've really got it all. And while many people rag on them for having 3 tanks, they cover pretty much everything within it. It's all covers the dive heroes, Punk the off tanks, and Marvel the shield tanks. I'm really not too high on Marvel though, I'll be real. Their supports also cover everything. I think Faith is very well rounded and solid on everything he plays, and Crimzo plays pretty much everything to a high level, with MCD there to prepare for a double flex metas, and is very solid. There's real star power on the team as well. Striker is obviously going to be crazy good, but Valentine is a great Genji who appears to be strong right now. Victoria has a ton of potential as a young rookie prospect. It's all if he can get on the Hammond or Winston is really good, and Crimzo and MCD are both good gamers. While there could be issues if they run into a harmful meta, do poorly, and drama ensues, they should prove to be really, really solid and are prepared for pretty much anything, though I think on paper their talent is average. Number 11 is going to be the Hangzhou Spark. It's kind of a shame I have to put them here as they have an obscene amount of star talent on their roster, but I can't see them doing too much at the moment. On paper, they are an easy playoff team in my opinion. Shy, Alpha E, Gouche, Ligue, Super Rick are all top tier pieces, and Pineapple and Irony are really solid as well. But Shangun has a big challenge here. He has to not only develop 4 rookies, but take care of a totally mixed roster which he's never been a part of before. And he's away from his golden geese profit and gesture. I'm really concerned. I put them relatively high just based on paper talent. I can see them being title contenders if they get their shit together, but they could also be competing for Verse and APEC. But I mean, then again, what are some other teams going to do if Shy or Alpha just picks you off out of nowhere? But they do have the biggest range, so I'm going to put them right in the middle. Number 10 is going to be the Toronto Defiant. I think these guys are looking really, really solid and should be pushing top 5 in NA. Hisu is one of the best hit scans in the region and is a bit underrated in my opinion. Chorong Toil is an absurdly good support line, and I also really like their coaching staff of KDG and Moby Dick. And this is some scrim books as well. They are apparently performing very well and are looking top 5 in scrims. They're ready to have their most successful year yet, but that's not really saying much. I do have some questions about this roster though. While although as a fantastic tracer, I don't think it can keep up with a lot of the other flex DPS in the region, and Finale is the same story. It makes for an overall underwhelming DPS line despite how good I consider Hisu, and their tank line is a bit overrated. While Muse is great at a bunch of heroes, Ryan is a clear weakness, and unfortunately for the Defiant, Ryan seems to be meta in NA still. And Hotba is decent. I don't think he's especially top tier. Honestly, I think plenty of other tanks in the 11 to 6 range are above him, including Kalios and Piggy, but he's solid. Overall though, this is a well-rounded team, but unfortunately I don't think they're too special outside of their support line. Frankly, I would have had them lower if not for Scrimbugs saying they're pushing top 5. I have high but tempered hopes for this team. Number 9 is going to be the Washington Justice. I don't want to put them this low. In my original draft of my list, I had them at 7. But I just can't trust this org to do well. It's almost impressive how they continually managed to screw up last year, despite having top tier talent. Now it's really a mixed bag. I can understand why people would want to rate them lower than this. Their support line is really bad, at least until Vigilante comes in. But Vigilante is definitely top tier. After he comes in, it'll be average at worst. If he come in immediately, I'd probably put them against the 2 above this list. Probably at 7 like I originally had them. But they'll have a support line of Krillin and Opener for half this season, which knocks them down a few rankings. And those 2 are pretty bad for an NA support line. They are an incredibly solid roster otherwise. Decay, Happy, and Assassin is a nasty DPS line. And Mag could still be top tier once Vigilante comes in, but I can't trust them too much with Supreme in there, though Ty Dola being in there could be a boon for them. I think he's legitimately a really exciting coach. I honestly think Mag Kalios is a nasty lineup as well. I have pretty high expectations for these guys. In his matter, these guys should pound, and I definitely think they're pushing playoffs by the end of the season, and definitely pushing top 5 in A as well. Number 8 is going to be the Houston Outlaws. I'm really not too high on these guys. The DPS lineup is solid as all hell. Pelican is obviously insane, then Dante and Merritt are top tier in their own right. The DPS line is maybe top 5 in the world, but the rest of the team has some issues. Piggy is a great player, but not the most flexible even within his own role. He's an elite Sigma, good Zarya, and decent Diva. And unluckily for Piggy, Sigma is not anywhere close to the meta at the moment. He's a good prospect, but I'm not that high on him. And the support line is underwhelming in my opinion. Lastro and Iris are great players, but Iris hasn't proven himself off of the Baptiste pretty much. I know he can play other heroes, but I want to see them first, and I don't think Lastro is as good as people hype him up to be. No main support is worrying as well. And Junkbunk, I don't rate highly as most. There were clear adaptation issues that have apparently remained true over scrims, where they struggled to get back into new metas. However, they have allegedly proven to tango with the big 4 in scrims, and Pelican provides that X factor of a carry, and Dante and Merritt are no joke either. I would also say that I wish they had 2 hit scans, as they seem to be strong, but I don't really see a meta where this DPS trio would struggle, though the lack of a main tank or Lucio player does make me worry. Number 7 is going to be the Chengdu Hunters. I had them at 3 before. 3. Now look at what they did. I feel like they might be overrated even now by me. A lot of people would disagree with them being over the Outlaws, but they still have a really solid roster. Jinmu is the only really bad part of this starting roster, and I don't think he's even that bad. He's just inflexible. I think even if Jinmu has to slip out of his comfort zone, Leave will be enough to carry the DPS line. I consider him to be the best DPS in the world right now, and him being on the team absolutely gives me a lot of faith in them. Gaga is still an incredible tank player, Monk was arguably a top 5 flex support last year, and Nisha with enough playtime could be as good as Yveltal. They could very well be underperforming though. Team morale could be very low due to the implosion, but Yauxi I consider to be a very good coach. He's definitely a downgrade from Ray, but he's solid. It's just such a shame. These guys are still a real good team, but they are much more meta dependent due to Jinmu. Oprita would have been huge for them. I think they're still playoff caliber and can be title contenders in the right meta, but they fall behind several teams, and I could see them falling even lower. Their floor is much lower than their ceiling. But I do also kind of like this underdog look for them. I think they're pretty scary. Next up, number 6 is the Atlanta Reign. I am really hyped for this team. Incredible rookie support duo that I would consider an upgrade over last year due to their synergy and flexibility, and individual talent. I'd even say OG is better than Mesa and UV is better than Iris. Hawk and Gator are separated, but Hawk has apparently been impressing greatly in scrims and had a wide flexibility, so I'm not too down on him, and their DPS line is still cracked. Nero is a clear downgrade from Pelican, but is still very good. Venom is a Tracer prodigy, and Kai is potentially the best pure hit scan at the game. But I do see some issues. Gator is not that great in my opinion. He has value outside of the game, but I don't think his mechanics stand out that much, so Hawk will need to pick up the slack on heroes like Doomfist, potentially even Winston and Hammond, and I think that could cause issues. This is a bit more abstract, but I feel like the DPS line lacks an explosive hard carry until Speedily comes of age, which is too late into the season to change much in my opinion. Nero is great, but I don't think he's as good as many other flex DPS in the region, so I'm going to need to see Kai take over the game at a high level and become an MVP candidate. I really need to see him become a carry to the extent like Pelican, Sparkle, Lip, Leave, and probably Proper. And while I'm not one of those people who think Unter was the second coming of Jesus, their coaching staff is really small, with only Seffi and Danny being there. They're good coaches, don't get me wrong, but it's a bit concerning when keeping up with big and constant meta changes is likely a huge part of the upcoming season. But this is a really well-rounded roster with great individual talent. I can see them contending for the title yet again, especially when Speedily comes of age. Number 5 is the San Francisco Shock. Yeah, I know. Solo rookie tank. No main support. How could I possibly put them above some of these other teams? Well, I'm high on Hopium and facts and logic. First of all, Proper. Second of all, Kilo and Sam are underrated pieces in my opinion. Sam is a bit worse than Dante and Nero in my opinion, but he has a ton of potential. And Kilo gets ragged on a lot, but it's hard to deny his talent. When he's on, he could definitely rival a lot of the top tier talent in the league on hitscan. But I joked about it before, but Proper, oh boy. I was thinking it earlier, but the scrimbooks have proven to me that this kid is simply the new gen Leaf. He's absurdly good at almost every single hero. Would not surprise me if he wound up winning MVP of the whole year. Kaluge is solo tanking, and that could hurt their flexibility, but I think he's being a little underrated. He's really, really, really good, and he has been for 4 years. I would say he's on the edge of the top tier of off-tanks in the region. Finn and Violet are also a bit questionable as a support line. Finn is easily top tier though and will be absurdly strong, but I think Violet's performance on the main support could very well make or break this team. I think he's top tier on the Brig and arguably Mercy, but his Lucio is apparently just passable. I think this won't be an issue contending with lower tier teams, but for top tier teams, it could be exposed. Considering the strength of Lucio in the meta right now, that will likely be an issue early on, but the individual pieces here just give me so much faith. Proper can take over a game and carry. Kilo absolutely is top tier potential. Finn and Violet are god tier flex supports, and Violet is more flexible than people give him credit for in my opinion, and Kaluge can compete with the best on off tanks. That's not even mentioning one of the biggest pickups of the season, 9K reuniting with Krusty to wreak havoc. These guys literally won the league together, and I would not be surprised if these guys were just the best coaching staff. They proved to be incredible back in Season 2, where they were easily the best in the league. They were incredibly adaptive throughout, being especially good at developing talent. Them, plus the best rookies in the market by far, huge stonks. Overall, they aren't as well-rounded as many other teams, which knocks them down a peg, but they are crazy good. Next up, Seoul Dynasty at number 4. These guys are nuts. Obviously, the DPS line is nuts. Profit and Fitz already pretty much 2v6'd every other APAC team to a 12-4 record, but adding Stalker, who is probably the second best flex DPS out of contenders, makes this the second best DPS line in the league, arguably the best if you're feeling really bullish. Smurf is a legendary off-tank. Despite not having as much playtime recently, he's still probably a top 3 main tank in the world right now behind Fate and Fearless. Hell, I'd even argue Smurf could be better than Fate off the Wrecking Ball. This is a tad reminiscent of Washington, I'd say, with an absurdly good DPS and tank line, but unfortunately a middling support line. I would have a lot more faith in this backline had Jonak not retired, but unfortunately here we are. Creative is a solid but not top tier outside of the Ana, though Ana luckily seems strong, and while I like Vindame, he's a bit of a brick one trick. I think he can work on his Lucio, but I want to see more of it before I can say he can keep up with the ones above him. Kind of funny how Lucio was so strong, but the 5 I have below this all don't have great Lucios. Kind of interesting. Number 3 is going to be the Los Angeles Gladiators. Yeah, these guys are big boys again. They've held onto a core and made some huge moves. Firstly, their support line is absurd. Finastro is absolutely incredible. He's good on pretty much every mate support, but his Lucio especially is perfect for Overwatch 2. Highly aggressive, but smart. Skeet is potentially the best brig in the world, but is still good at the flex supports and should pound into the double flex meta if needed. And then there's Shu, who is arguably the best individual flex support last year, putting out DPS levels of damage and having insane clutches. I think this straight up could be the best support line in the world. Shu is on par, if not better, than Fielder and Isayaki, and I would say Funny Astro is on par with Lee Jaegon and Shio. That may be a hot take, and having Skewed there for the flexibility could put them over the edge against Shanghai and Dallas. The tank line I'm also very high on. Space was at worst a top 3 off-tank in NA last year. He was nuts all year, and he did win a role star off his performance, though I don't know that he deserved it over Hawk. He's nuts, and I think Reiner is also crazy. I've watched a lot of American Tornado in preparation for this year, and Reiner is insane on pretty much everything he touches. He's one of the most flexible players in the league, and I think he'll be straight up elite in the Overwatch 2 system, where you necessarily have to be flexible. The only question marks about this roster are the DPS. Kevster was at least a top 5 DPS player last year. His impact when he was off ping was immense, and he's just cracked on all projectiles, and especially Tracer. He is going to pound, but there are definitely questions about Ans and Pettifan. Ans didn't have the best year last year, and Pettifan hasn't played Overwatch competitively for 2 years. Will Kevster have to hard carry? I don't necessarily think so. I think Ans is still very, very good. It's just that his heroes were not very meta, and the Shock in general were not as coordinated as usual, and cannot create as much space. With Kevster, Space, Shu, and Funny Astro around him, they can really give Ans what he needs to pound. And Pettifan, I still have doubts about. I don't think he'll keep up with most of the roster and will be benched for Ons until late into the season, but he is apparently very solid in scrims and is quickly improving. These guys are just a very well-rounded squad with a lot of star players. I don't really see a meta they can't pound in, and they seem very good for upcoming metas as well. The coaching staff is also elite, with Face, Unturned, Smash. I just can't see any glaring weaknesses other than maybe Pettifan, but even then he's not that bad. They just aren't quite as good as my top 2. Number 2 is going to be the Dallas Fuel. These guys still seem unstoppable in NA, honestly. Unless it's a hard double hit scan meta, Sparkle and Doha are still some of the best flex DPS in the world. Fearless is still insane, and Huntbit is probably my pick for the best off-tank in the world. Shio is an upgrade over Jexay, and Fielder is still a top 3 flex support in the league. Their roster on paper is still nutty, but they managed to fill the hit scan role they had before with Edison and Gurrio. I'm not too behind these guys, though, if I'm being real. Edison hasn't impressed me much since his Contenders days, and honestly, Gurrio never really impressed me whatsoever in Contenders. But Dallas fans can be confident in these guys due to the head coach, Rush. Rush is probably the best head coach in the league. He's nuts. He managed to get the team on its feet and still be the best team in NA for most of the year, despite the lack of a hit scan on their part. I trust in him enough that I think these hit scan picks will work out in some capacity. But despite any issues with its DPS line, Sparkle and Doha are already a top DPS duo, even with the hit scan handicap. and with the upcoming Doomfist Genji meta, hell, even the Ryan meta, these guys could straight up be the best team in the world right now. But overall, my number 1 pick, the Shanghai Dragons, takes the cake for me. This team really has no weaknesses in my mind, aside from a few that we'll get into. Every single member of the starting lineup is at least top 3 in their role right now. They have been for the past 2 seasons. The lineup is incredibly stacked, and with Moon still at the helm, there is no real reason not to have them at number 1. So I'll actually go over some reasons for doubt instead. Fate I don't consider to be very flexible. For all of this success the Dragons saw last year off his back, almost all of it was off the back of his Wrecking Ball. He was stiffed by Fearless on both Winston and Ryan, and Wrecking Ball unfortunately does not seem to be meta right now. Fleta, while still an incredible player, is not a hard carry like other flex DPS, like Prophet or Lee for example, so if the Genji meta does become prevalent, he may wind up benched for Who Are You simply due to the difference in playstyle, which would be very interesting, and I don't trust Who Are You that much. Finally, the coaching staff. While Moon is a great coach, the loss of Dongsu and J-Fuel could be cause for concern. I don't think Moon is an elite coach like Rusty or Rush just yet, and supposedly has a very hands-off approach to coaching. The lack of discipline could potentially come in hard. While Shanghai are definitely my number 1, especially in APAC, where every team has some weakness on paper, Shanghai does not really have any, but it wouldn't surprise me if Dallas, Glad, Shock, or Rain were able to stick it to them at various points of the season. But they're still undoubtedly my number 1. But that's my ranking. Any takes you disagree with? Any Pepega ones? What do you all think? Thanks for watching. Remember to hit like and subscribe for more. I upload nearly daily Overwatch League content, and I'm trying to hit 1,000 subs by the end of Season 5, so any subscription helps greatly. Thanks!